לשמך עליון ולזמר לשמך עליון. מזמור של יום השבת טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון ולזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר הזדהר באמונת בלילות עלי אסוב עלי נבל עלי היגיון בכינור. מזמור של יום השבת טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון ולזמר לשמך עליון. מזמור של יום השבת טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון ולזמר לשמך עליון. כי ישמי אדוני בפועלך ונושא ידה ארנן. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מזמור של יום השבת טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון ולזמר לשמך עליון. מזמור של יום השבת טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון ולזמר לשמך עליון.
מה יפה היום שבת שלום. מה יפה היום שבת שלום. שבת שבת שלום. שבת שבת שלום. שבת שבת שלום. שבת shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, good morning. It's wonderful to welcome all of you into the sanctuary and also to welcome you online. This is another reminder that if you have your phones still on, you might want to turn your phones off. But as we gather and come together in community, I invite you, if you are wearing a talit, to don your talit and recite the blessing with me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav vetzivanu lehitatef batzitzit. We sing together on page 105, and if you would like to stand, please stand.
Bishnotecha Yisrael,
Be seated. And we read together as we say the prayers of our ancestors. Help us, O God, to remember their faith and devotion, their joy and suffering, and make us worthy of our heritage. May the tradition we have received live in us and pass from us to generations we shall never know, enriched by the truth we have found and the good we have done. So may we fulfill our task on earth and receive our blessing. Eternal God, school us in your teachings and make us loyal to your commandments. May we never consent to evil or surrender to temptation or self-content. Help us to rise above selfishness and make us responsive to the voice of conscience. Direct our every impulse to your service. Today and every day, may we merit kindness and compassion in your sight and in the sight of all who behold us, and let us know your love. We praise you, O God, for the love you daily show us. Together we read, Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, hamehulal b'fi amo, meshubach umfo'ar b'lshon chasidav v'avadav, b'shvachot u'vizmirot, negadeh lecha v'namlichecha malkeinu yachid chei ha'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, Melech mehulal batishbachot.
Ashrei yoshvei veitecha, od hallelujah, Selah. Ashrei ha'am shekacha lo,
Psalm of David. Always I will exalt you, my sovereign God, and praise your name forever. Beginning each day with praise, I will extol your name forever. Cause us to see your greatness is beyond us, Eternal One, forever to be praised. Declaring your works to each generation, We bear witness to your mighty acts. Even as they speak of your splendor, so I will meditate on your wonderful deeds. For as they tell of your awesome might, so I will recount your greatness. Great is your goodness, which they celebrate as they sing of your righteousness. Holding us in your grace and compassion, you are patient and abounding in love. In your goodness, eternal God, you have mercy on all your creatures. Joyfully your works shall thank you, and your faithful ones shall praise you. Knowing how great is your majesty, they proclaim your might. Let all humanity perceive your power in the glorious splendor of your redemption. Mighty is your rule and everlasting. Your reign endures in all generations. O God, you support the falling and raise up all who are bowed down. Pleading, all look and hope to you, and you give them their food in due season. Quietly you open your hand and satisfy the needs of every living creature. Righteous are you in all your ways, and loving in all your deeds. So near are you to all who call upon you, to all who call upon you in truth. The desire of those who revere you, you fulfill. You hear their cry and help them. Unceasingly our lips shall sing God's praise. So may all creatures laud God's holy name forever. Please rise. And if you would like to turn to page 135. Yishtabach shimcha la'ad malkenu. Ha'el ha'melech ha'gadol v'ha'kadosh b'shamayim u'va'aretz. Ki lecha na'eh Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu. Shir u'shvacha, halel ve'zimra, brachot ve'hodaot, me'ata ve'ad olam. Baruch ata Adonai, הבוחר בשירי זמרה. ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך, לעולם ועד.
Praised be the one to whom our praise is due. We praise the Eternal One, to whom our praise is due forever. You may be seated. Let us continue together in English. We praise you, Eternal One, our God, Sovereign of the universe, Maker of light and Creator of darkness, Author of peace and Creator of all things. In your mercy you give light to the earth and all who live on it, and in your goodness you renew creation continually, day by day. How manifold are your works, O God! With wisdom have you made them all. The world is full of your creations. Your handiwork proclaims your praise. The radiant stars bear witness to your glory. We praise you, O God, Creator of light. Ahava rabba ahavtanu Adonai Eloheinu. Chemla gdola v'tera chamalta aleinu. Avinu malkeinu ba'avur avotenu shebatechu v'cha. ותלמדם חוקי חיים, כן תכוננו ותלמדנו. ותן בליבנו להבין ולהשכיל, לשמוע, ללמוד וללמד, לשמוע ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תורתך באהבה. והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, כי בנו בחרת לייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. Please rise. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
ברוך Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לעוד על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Please be seated.
למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות להם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Good and beautiful and true. Sound established and enduring are these words now and forever. True it is, eternal one, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song.
מי כמוך בלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדע בקודש, נורא תהילות אוסף פלא.
שירה חדשה, שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים. יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו.
אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל. גואלנו אדוני, צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל. Baruch atah Adonai, God Israel, God Israel, Israel.
Please rise. Adonai
Safatai tiftach ufi tehillatcha. Adonai Safatai tiftach ufi tehillatcha. Eternal God, open up my lips, that my mouth shall declare your praise.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריח השמש ומוריד הטל. ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישו אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך.
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו.
כבודו מלא עולם.
ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו. ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו.
במקומך מלכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך.
ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה.
Lador vador, from generation to generation, we will make known your greatness. To the end of time we will proclaim your holiness. Your praise, O our God, shall never depart from our lips. We praise you, Eternal One, the Holy God. Please be seated.
ישמחו במלכותך, ישמחו במלכותך, שומרי שבת וקוראי עונג, המקדשי שביעי, המקדשי שביעי, כולם ישמחו ויתענגו מטובך, והשביעי רצית בו השביעי רצית בו וקידשתו, חמדת ימים אותו קראת, זכר למעשה, למעשה בראשית.
And let's read together. Our God and God of our ancestors, may our rest on this day be pleasing in your sight. Sanctify us by your commandments and make us loyal to your teaching. Satisfy us with your goodness, gladden us with your salvation, and purify our hearts that we may serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Eternal One, let the holiness of your Sabbath enter our hearts, and may all Israel who hallow your name be exalted by its peace. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath. רצה אדוני אלוהינו בעמך ישראל, ותפילתם באהבה תקבל, ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך. ברוך אתה אדוני, שאותך לבדך ביראה נעבוד. מודים אנחנו לך, שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו לעולם ועד. צור חיינו, מגן אישנו, אתה הוא לדור ודור. נודה לך ונספר תהילתך, על חיינו המסורים בידיך, ועל נשמותינו הפקודות לך, ועל ניסיך שבכל יום עמנו, ועל נפלותיך וטובותיך שבכל עת ערב ובוקר וצהריים. ברוך אתה אדוני, הטוב שמך ולך נאה להודות.
Sim shalom, sim shalom, sim shalom, tova uvaracha, en v'chesed v'rachamim, aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael amecha, sim shalom, sim shalom.
Grant peace, welfare, and blessing, grace, love, and mercy to us and to all Israel, your people. As a loving parent, bless us with the light of your presence. For by the light of your presence, eternal God, you have revealed to us the law of life, a love of kindness and righteousness, blessing and mercy, life and peace. For it is good in your sight that your people Israel and all peoples be blessed at all times with your gift of peace. We praise you, O God, the source of peace. We'll take some time for silence. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Praying in the Amidah the words Ledor Vador, from generation to generation, I sort of thought of how blessed we are really as a congregation, that we don't just say these words, but you can really see them in action. It's so wonderful to have such a full choir back in the synagogue, and it's really wonderful to really have the different generations bring music to us. Today, maybe a slightly more mature choir compared to last night when we had Lydia, one of the young people in our community, really bring beautiful music into our sanctuary. But I think that is one of the beauties really of our community, that we don't just say Le Dor Vador, we really truly live Le Dor Vador, and we truly pass the tradition on to the next generation, whether it's the music, and thank you, we're getting the congregation as well, so you get to see all our congregants here in the sanctuary, and later at the Kiddush, hopefully we'll be able to see all of you who are joining us online. But we pass music on and we pass the Torah on, and so we turn to our Torah reading, Kriyat HaTorah. If you turn to page 490 for Torah service number 2. Assemble the people, men, women, and children, and the strangers in your cities, to hear and learn to revere the Eternal One, your God, and observe faithfully all the precepts of this Torah. And let their children, who do not yet know it, hear, that they too may learn the Eternal One, your God. Please rise.
V'ha'ahenenu b'toratecha, v'da'abekinu b'mitzvotecha, v'yachen avavenu, v'yahava u'yira et shamecha.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Gadlu Adonai ti uneromemo Shemo yachdav. Let us magnify the Eternal One. Together let us exalt God's name.
Lama Adonai, Hagdula, Hagavura, Hativeret, Hanen Tzachod, Ki hod b'shamayim u'ba'aretz,
Please be seated. So today we are still in the book of Genesis in Bereshit, and it's full of good stories. We have the opening of today's Sedra, Abram in the tent, having been circumcised, receiving the angels that tell him that Sarah's finally going to have a son. We have the binding of Isaac a bit later on, that passage that we read just a few weeks ago in Rosh Hashanah. But today I'm reading the story of Hagar and Ishmael. It's a somewhat more difficult story. It's a story full of jealousy and anger and resentment. But I wonder if there's something maybe a little different that we could take from the tale. But who is Hagar? She's the Egyptian. She's the servant woman, the slave that Sarah gives to Abraham so that finally Abraham in his old age can have a son. And of course, Ishmael's born, Hagar's son. But who is Hagar? She's Hagar. And in a way, I think we're supposed to think of her as Hagar b'tocham, the stranger who's in your midst. So in a way, she's sort of the stranger. She's sort of nameless. In a way, she is oppressed. Because when she becomes pregnant, Sarah gets jealous and basically drives her out of the camp. She's driven away pregnant, but God tells her to come back. And today we'll be reading about Sarah finally having the son that's been promised. She has Isaac, and that's where the jealousy begins. And again, jealousy and fear and hatred, and Hagar's driven away again. It's a somewhat human tragedy of resentment between fear and jealousy, but one can't help but think that if maybe if the protagonists in the story had had a bit more empathy, a bit more sympathy, maybe some compassion and some understanding, it might have ended a little bit differently. So we're in chapter 21, and I'll be reading verses 1 to 21. But let's start with the blessings. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar mikol hamim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Vadonai pakadet Sarah, and the Eternal remembered Sarah. Kasher mar, as the Eternal had said. Vayas Adonai la Sarah kasher diber, and the Eternal did for Sarah as the Eternal had said. Vataha, and she conceived. V'teled Sarah la Avraham ben liz kunav, and Sarah bore a son for Abram in his old age. L'moed asher diber oto Elohim, at the time which the Eternal had said to Abraham. Vayikra Avraham et shem beno, and Abram called his son, Hanolad lo, the one that was born to him, asher yalda lo Sarah, in case you haven't got the message by now, the one that Sarah bore to him, Yitzchak. So this is Yitzchak. This isn't Hagar's son Yishmael, this is Yitzchak. Vayamal Avraham et Yitzchak beno ben shmonat yamim. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when Isaac was 8 days old, kasher tzivar to Elohim, as the Eternal had commanded him. Avraham ben ma'at shana b'holad lo et Yitzchak beno. And Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac his son was born. Vatomer Sarah, and Sarah said, Tzachok asali Elohim, and the Eternal has made laughter for me. Kol hashamea yitzachak li. Everyone who hears about it will laugh on account of me. V'tomar mimi leil Avraham henika banim Sarah. And who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children for him? Ki eladti ben lizkunav, because I've borne him a son in his old age. And that's the source of the word Yitzchak. It's to do with laughter. And we'll hear that play on words again in a minute. Vayigdal hayeled, and the child grew up. Vayigamal, and was weaned. Vayas Avraham mishteh gadol b'yam hegamal et Yitzchak, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. V'tera Sarah et ben Hagar hamitzrit, and Sarah's son saw the son of Hagar, the Israelite, asher yaldalo la Avraham, the one that Hagar had born to Abraham, Metzachek. So Ishmael is Metzachek, he's laughing, he's scoffing. Or maybe Metzachek, he's playing at being Yitzchak. He's trying to usurp Yitzchak's position. And so V'tomer Avraham, and Sarah said, Garesh ha'amah hazot, get rid of that servant woman, just the servant woman, nameless, oppressed. Ve'et bana, and at her son, again, not named, nameless, oppressed. Ki lo yirash ben ha'amah hazot im beni, so that the son of that servant woman will not inherit with my son, in Yitzchak, with Isaac. Vayara hadavar ma'od be'nei Avraham. And in Abraham's eyes, the whole business was very bad indeed, alodot beno, on account of his son. So all of a sudden, Abram has a voice here, his son, Beno. Vayomar Elohim el Avraham, and the Eternal said to Abraham, Al yira beinecha al hana v'al amatecha. Don't let it seem bad in your eyes on account of the child and of your servant woman. Kol asher tomar elecha Sarah, shma b'kola. Everything which Sarah says to you, listen to her voice. Ki b'yitzchak yikareh lecha zara, for it's through Isaac that you will have your descendants. V'gamit ben ha'ama l'goy asimenu. But also the son of the servant woman I will also make into a mighty nation. Ki zarachahu, because he's also your son. Vayashkem Avraham baboker, and Abraham got up early in the morning. When else do we have Abraham yashkeming baboker? In the next chapter, we have exactly the same phrase. Vayashkem Avraham baboker, when Abraham gets up early in the morning to go and bind his son Isaac. The parallels between the two stories are really being brought out in the text. And so Abram gets up early in the morning. Vayikach lechem, he takes bread, v'chemat mayim, and a bottle of water. Vayiten el Hagar, and he gives them to Hagar, sam al shichma, placing them on her shoulder. Ve'et hayeled, and the child, Ishmael, vayishalcheha, and he sent her away. V'telech, and she went. V'teta b'midbar Beersheva, and she wandered in the wilderness of Beersheva. Vayichlu hamayim min hachemet, and the water was in the bottle was exhausted. V'tashlech et hayeled tachet echad hashichim, and Hagar placed her son under one of the bushes. V'telech, and she went off. V'teshev la mineged hacheg kimtach ve'keshet, and she went off and sat opposite, about the distance of a bow shot. Ki amra al ereh b'mot hayeled, because she said, let me not see my son's death. V'teshev mineged, and she sat opposite. V'tisai kola, and she lifted up her voice. V'tefk, and she wept. Vayishma Elohim et kol hana'ah, and the Eternal heard the voice of the child. Vayikra malach Elohim el Hagar min hashamayim, and an angel called to Hagar from the heavens. Vayomar, saying, Vayomer and said to her, Malach Hagar, what's up, Hagar? Al tiri, do not be afraid. Kishama Elohim et kol hana'ah, basher husham, for God has heard the voice of the child where he is. Kumi, rise up. Se'i et hana'ah, lift up your son, v'achziki et yadech bo, and hold him fast in your hand. Ki lagoy gadol asimanu, for I will make him into a great nation. Vayivkach Elohim et eneha, and the Eternal, and God opened up Hagar's eyes. Vatera ber mayim, and she saw a well of water. Vatelech vatmaleh hachemet mayim, and she went and she filled the bottle with water. Vateshget hana'ah, and she gave the child water to drink. Vayihi Elohim et hana'ah, and God was with the child. Vayigdal, and he grew. Vayishev b'midbar, and lived in the desert. Vayihi roveh keshet, and became a skilled archer. Vayishev b'midbar Paran, and settled in the wilderness of Paran. Vatikach lo ima isher me'eretz Mitzrayim, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Please rise. You may be seated. Our Haftarah this morning comes not from the prophets, not from the readings of the prophets, so there's a slightly different blessing, which I'm sorry you don't have in your prayer books, but it's from the book of Psalms. I thought we'll select a lovely psalm, Psalm 111, as our psalm for this morning. So we recite the blessing together. The liturgy should be correct, yes. So we recite, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav vetzivanu likro b'chitvei hakodesh. And Mimi will read for us.
Hallelujah. I praise the eternal God with all my heart in the assembled congregation of the upright. The works of the Eternal One are great, within reach of all who desire them. God's deeds are splendid and glorious. God's beneficence is everlasting. God's wonders have won renown. The Eternal One is gracious and compassionate, giving food to those who fear God, those ever mindful of God's covenant. God's powerful work was revealed to God's people in giving them the heritage of nations. God's handiwork is truth and justice. All God's precepts are enduring, well-founded for all eternity, wrought of truth and equity. God sent redemption to the people, ordained God's covenant for all time. God's name is holy and awesome. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Eternal One. All who practice it gain sound understanding. Praise of God is everlasting.
I'm sorry, I'm bringing the Torah with me. The choreography is always a challenge when your Torah reader who did Hagbah is also in the choir and therefore has to be back at the choir. So I've got the Torah, but please do join me in the blessing after the Haftorah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol haolamim, tzadik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer ve'oseh, hamdaber u'mkayem shekol devarav emet v'tzedek. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל כל כתבי הקודש ועל יום השבת הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמנוחה לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. Please rise for our loyal blessings. We're on page 493. Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth, and all the royal family, for those who govern our country and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it might be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity. May the one who blessed our ancestors bless all our sisters and brothers in the house of Israel, who enter synagogues to pray and to give aid to those in need. May the Holy One, to whom all praise is due, hear their prayers and help them to fulfill their aspiration for good. Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill an age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land for the benefit of all its inhabitants, and to implement the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with their neighbors and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem. Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki nizgav shemo levado.
Israel.
This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel in time to come, says the Eternal One. I will put my teaching within them and engrave it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No longer shall anyone need to teach a friend or a neighbor to know me, for they shall all know me, young and old alike.
כי לכך טוב נתתי לכם, תורתי אל תעזבו, עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה, ותמכך יאושר. דרכיך דרכי נועם, נטול וטיבותיך שלום. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה
Please be seated. I left my hair in the taxi because the driver was a creep, chatting on my dead phone just so he can see. I was careful to show my face on the CCTV, told a joker to the bouncer so that he'd remember me leave. So I guess that's where we are. Isn't it amazing what I'm contemplating to get home? You okay with where we are? Because I see nothing changing. It's beyond frustrating. I just want to walk home. These lyrics by 20-year-old British pop singer and TikTok personality, Josie Proto, written after the murder of Sarah Everard this summer, detail in blunt and unsparing terms the various ways young women ensure they return safely from a night out or a late commute. Sarah Everard's murder shocked the public and brought violence against women into the headlines. But as the murder of Sabina Ness highlighted, since Sarah Everard's brutal murder, only one thing has changed: the death toll. In the 28 weeks that followed Everard's murder, 81 other UK women were killed in circumstances where the suspect is a man. And just this week, we read in the news that young women going clubbing, primarily university students, not only have to watch their drinks to avoid having them spiked, but they must also now fear being injected with drugs. A couple of weeks ago in the Jewish news, Naomi Dickinson, the chief executive of Jewish Women's Aid, asked, "Where is the outrage from our community at violence against women?" She is right to demand action from the Jewish community. When I addressed the topic of violence against women in my sermon in April of this year, I said that we have to stop making excuses for the fact that our religious texts have contributed to normalizing misogyny, homo and transphobia, and toxic masculinity for centuries. And we must examine how we, our faith tradition, the Jewish community, our synagogue, and as individuals, have perpetuated the harm that our sacred texts have caused. And yet I notice how easy it is, even for myself, to gloss over the numerous toxic stories contained in our textual traditions. We have only made it as far as Genesis chapter 21, and women have already been portrayed as the seductress leading to the banishment of all humankind out of paradise, a wife sold into sex slavery to protect her husband in a foreign land, daughters offered up to the mob for sexual abuse to protect male guests, daughters portrayed as evil instigators of incest, and a handmaid forced to bear the child of her mistress's husband, just to be banished into the wilderness to be left to die, as we have just read in the story of Hagar in our portion this week. These stories are deeply painful, and it is understandable that we don't like to spoil our Shabbos joy and rather skip them in favor of more inspiring passages. And maybe if we were living in a society where every human being grew up feeling equally safe just to walk home, we could say that there is no need to dwell on these gruesome stories and just occasionally look at them as a reminder of how far we've got. But that is not the world we live in. As Josie Proto highlighted in her song that I quoted at the start of the sermon, there has been shockingly little progress in the past decades when it comes to women's safety. And so we must look at these texts again and again, and we must scrutinize how, as a community, we have embraced rather than rejected these stories, failing to view them critically in a way that could lead to change. Throughout the ages, apologetic commentaries have attempted to minimize or even to justify the violence against women that is depicted in our sacred literature, by explaining the violence as part of God's greater plan, or trying to contextualize it in the historic reality, often even suggesting that the women in our stories somehow got a better deal than women contemporaries, or even by blaming the women for the violence committed against them. If we look at the story of Hagar and Ishmael's banishment, which we just read, we find, for instance, a commentary by Rabbi Elchanan Samet, lecturer at the Michlelet Herzog Lifshitz College in Gush Etzion, who quotes several Near Eastern documents to vindicate the behavior of Abraham and Sarah, saying that they were acting within the moral and legal conventions of their day. While the late Professor Nechama Leibovich strenuously objects to this line of interpretation, insisting instead that the Torah is not interested in noting Abraham's conformity to contemporary custom, she too minimizes the violence of the story by maintaining that the Torah offers a sympathetic treatment of Hagar, including the poignant comment of the angel that God responded to Hagar's cry and blessed her so that her descendants would be free and a great nation. Professor Leibovitz simply glosses over the fact that the Torah does not criticize Sarah or Abraham, leaving us to believe that they acted legally in their context. Most disappointingly, none of these commentaries allow us to learn positive lessons for what we might be able to do to create a society that would prevent these acts of violence. They fail to contribute to Tikkun Olam. This failure is worse than just an act of omission. It is more than disappointing, for it has deadly consequences. All the biblical stories of violence against women have one clear commonality, which remains until this day at the heart of violence against women. It is power of men over women. As the UN's Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women notes, violence against women is a manifestation of historically unequal power relations between men and women, which have led to the domination over and discrimination against women by men, and to the prevention of the full advancement of women, and that violence against women is one of the crucial social mechanisms by which women are forced into a subordinate position compared with men. To put it more simply, The problem is the patriarchy. Better policing, sufficient street lighting, and bag searches at the entrance to nightclubs are plasters that we can put on the gaping wound of endemic violence against women. But the wound is far too deep for a plaster to do the trick. We need sutures. We need to fight for societal and legal changes that will eliminate gender hierarchies and subordination. We need to smash the patriarchy. And I believe liberal Judaism is in the perfect position to lead on this issue. We are a movement committed to equality and elimination of hierarchy. As the success of the current liberal Judaism education series, Forgotten Lives, shows, liberal Jews are interested in learning about the contribution that Jewish women have made throughout the ages. We are committed to righting historic wrongs, to ensure that women are not forgotten, thought of as lesser human beings. As a movement, we can tackle the causes of misogyny head on and educate our young people to create a better, more equal, safer future for women. We can ensure that in our Jewish communities, perpetrators of abuse are not tolerated. Women can reach the support they need and are confident to reach out for it. We must not stand idly by. In 1938, Rabbi Regina Jonas wrote, "I hope that a time will come for all of us in which there will be no more questions on the subjects of woman. For as long as there are questions, something is wrong. God has placed abilities and callings in our hearts without regard to gender. Thus, each of us has the duty, whether man or woman, to realize those gifts God has given. If you look at things this way, one takes woman and man for what they are, human beings. God has indeed placed upon us the responsibility for creating a just society and granted us the gifts to achieve this. As human beings, we have brought about progress in so many areas. Building a society in which every human being can feel safe, irrespective of their gender, is not beyond our reach. And even if it might seem impossible at times, we must lead the way. As in Pirkei Avot, you do not have to complete the task, but neither are you free to desist from it. Ken yehi ratzon, for this is most certainly God's will. Amen. And so we turn to the Aleinu, to the prayer that we recite really in the hope for a better life, for a better society, a society that is just, that treats everyone equal. And I invite you to turn to page 520, and when you found your page, if you would like to rise. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה יוצר בראשית, אשר שם חלקנו לייחד את שמו, וגורלנו להמליך מלכותו. שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד ארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת עוזו בגובהי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס סולתו, ככתוב בתורתו. וידעת היום והשבות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד.
Haaretz, Bayom Hahu Yeh Adonai Echad, Yeh Adonai Echad, U'Shamo Echad.
As we worship before you, O God, we think of those who once shared with us the joys and burdens of life and who are no longer in our midst. The sorrow of bereavement is softened by the bond of love which continues to unite us with our dear ones, and by our cherished memories of them, which we will always carry in our hearts. May all that was good in their lives remain with us as an influence for good. O God, grant consolation to those who are in sorrow, and light to those in darkness. Teach us at all times to put our trust in you and to praise your name. And on this Shabbat, we think of those whose yahrzeit falls at this time. Brenda Shaw, the grandmother of Alison Elton. Farnas Jalali, the mother of Navid. Flora Offenheimer, who is remembered by Johanna May. Jeff Moss, the brother of Leslie, uncle to Robin, Pip, and Davina. Leah Fresco Bars, the grandmother of Dorothy Ahrens. Leon and Rosie Lowy Königsberg, the parents of Mimi, grandparents of Jenny and Sarah. Lillian Cooper, the mother of Adele Slifkin. Macy Freeman, the mother of Cynthia Drapkin and Olivia. Morris Angel, the father of Carol Jordan. Nikki Cole, the mother of Penny Custo and Nigel. Pat Davis, wife of Simon and mother of Belinda Rose. And Selma Bloomberg, friend of John and Carol Kettle. Zichronam livracha, may their memory be a source of blessing to us as we recite the Kaddish together on page 524. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדה ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו, לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום, עלינו ועל כל ישראל ועל כל בני אדם, ואמרו Amen. May great peace descend from heaven, and abundant life be granted to us and all Israel, and let us say Amen. Please be seated. We are going to conclude with the Adon Olam in just a moment. If you are around, do join me for Havdalah this evening at or late afternoon at 5 o'clock on Zoom. It's always a lovely 15-20 minutes, or if you want to stick around, you can chat for much longer. We always have a group that decides to chat and chat and chat. So it's a really wonderful opportunity to come together, Havdalah at 5 o'clock. And otherwise, most Hebrew classes are not happening this week except my level 4 Hebrew class, which is happening. And if you've never tried it, you are most welcome, even if you feel your Hebrew isn't advanced. We are doing the Parashat HaShavua, so it's a good opportunity if you can't make it to our regular Parashat HaShavua group on Friday at noon, then you can come and join us at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. And the Forgotten Life series continues this Wednesday evening at 7:30 with Rabbi Jackie Tabik presenting about the life of Licoricia of Winchester. So if you don't know who she is, you might want to join that study session. And this is kind of a last call. If you are interested in Israeli politics, then do sign up to my Leobeck College Lehrhaus course, introducing an introduction to Israeli politics. The college seems to be very anxious that we have too many people signed up already, so they're threatening to close registrations. So if you do want to join, then please make sure to sign up so you don't miss out, although I'm sure we can sneak you in if you do want to. And that will be on Thursday evenings during the month of November, also online on Zoom. So without further ado, we are going to sing a beautiful choir, Adon Olam. Do join in with the singing, whether at home or in the sanctuary, Adon Olam.
Adon Olam, Hashem Olam, B'terem kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasav, V'chesam kol, Hazar Aleh Shemo Nikra, V'yacharek Yiglot HaKol, Levado Yimloch Nora, V'hu Hayah V'hu Hoveh, V'hu Yeh B'tifara, Adon Olam, Hashem Olam, B'terem kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasav, V'chesam kol, Hazar Aleh Shemo Nikra, V'yacharek Yiglot Shani, L'hamshira, L'hachbira, V'lireshit, V'litachlit, V'lo ha'oz v'ha'mizrah, Adon Olam, Hashem Olam, B'terem kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasav, V'chesam kol, Hazar Aleh Shemo Nikra, V'hu Eli, V'chai Goli, V'tzuchet li B'eit Zara, V'hu Nisi Umanos li, V'nakosi B'yom Ekra, Adon Olam, Hashem Olam, B'terem kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasav, V'chesam kol, Hazar Aleh Shemo Nikra, Be'ya'ado Avkidru li, Be'en Tishan Be'ya'ira, Be'imru hi gaviyati, Adonai li v'lo ira, Adon Olam, Hashem Olam, B'terem kol Yitzir Nivra, Li'et Nasav, V'chesam kol, Hazar Aleh Shemo Nikra.
Would you please rise? Eternal God, grant strength to your people. Eternal God, bless your people with peace.
Adonai oz le'amo yitem, Adonai yavarech et amo b'shalom. Amen.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. And do please remain in the sanctuary. We're going to do Kiddush from the Bima, and then there will be an opportunity for you to get some wine and some challah at the back after the service. But we are going to bring in also, we already have them on the screen, our Zoom Kiddush group, so that we can bring the community all together in one. And we begin, there you go, you can see everyone getting themselves ready for legging out so that you get some wine or juice. But we'll sing together Veshamru.
Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et HaShabbat, la'asot et HaShabbat, l'doratam berit olam, beini uvein b'nei Yisrael. אותי לעולם. כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש.
And so we say together, Baruch Ata Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen l'chaim. And I can see beautiful chalot, of course, at home also, but our chala in the sanctuary. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat shalom. We're going to say goodbye to the live stream. We'll be back with the Zoom crowd in a moment. And Shabbat shalom to everyone.
Shema Yisrael.